Thank you for joining us, everyone. Welcome to ECKART. My name is Sean, and I am here with John Lonisak in Louisville, Kentucky. Today we're going to be talking about our A2CE, or Automotive Center of Excellence. But first, John, would you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, how long you've been here, and all that?
Sure. So the name is John Lonisak. I am in charge of technical service for our liquid coatings applications here in Louisville. My background is a paint formulator. I started in automotive paint many years ago up in Detroit, Michigan. Stayed there till about the early 1990s. Moved to the southeast and worked for Eastman Chemical Company in a similar role, tech service for several applications, primarily automotive and other industrial applications. I've been with ECKART now for 7 years. Mm-hmm.
Well, today you are helping me out with discussing our Automotive Center of Excellence, and we're going to talk about it in its entirety, its fullness. We're going to get to the robot, which is probably the more interesting piece of the entire puzzle. I mean, something whenever I started here and I came here for the first time, something I was pretty blown away with. But let's just first kind of explain what A2CE is and what we do here. Obviously where it's located and what's going on there.
Sure. So the Automotive Applications Center of Excellence was built to replicate application conditions similar to what a car sees when it's being painted in an OEM plant. The most impressive part of it, as you said, is our robot. It's a 6-axle robot, so we can paint really any part that we want to, because the arms of the robot can go around all over the place. The robot is equipped with a bell applicator, so once again replicating the bell application that a car would see. And why that is important is that we're trying to demonstrate the look of our aluminum and other effect pigments in the application. And bell application is a lot of volume of paint going on in a short period of time. So the effect pigment has an opportunity to swim around in the wet paint and not get a line. So in order to help our customers with their paint and help ourselves with our design of our pigments, the robot in the applications lab is really very helpful in fine-tuning the look, so we know exactly what it's going to look like when the paint gets applied online. Besides the robot, the other great thing about the application center is we have controlled humidity and temperature, so we can run it at a high humidity, high temperature, low humidity, low temperature, whatever the conditions that our customers need to work in, so that we can see how that affects the paint and how it goes on the part.
So it's kind of its uniqueness is that it's designed obviously to help our customers, but we've designed this center to mimic not our customer's environment, but actually their customer's environment.
That's right.
So this is all about replicating the actual coatings conditions that would occur in a manufacturing facility where an automotive manufacturer would be painting cars.
That's exactly right. And so we can, move the robot around a part. So typically when you can imagine a car or a truck being painted, it's not a flat panel. It's a lot of curves to it. So we can program the robot to follow the curves of the part. Can't get a full-size car into the booth, but we can get a fender or a door or a wheel. We'll do a lot of wheel work there. Or we can just do straight panels. And a lot of our demonstration videos show just using regular 4x12 panels. So we can do that, small parts, large parts, and once again, keeping the application conditions under control.
Going back to the robot, I'm sure one of the questions, I know one of the questions that I asked the first time I had seen it, what are there any, limitations? Can we actually run any coating system through it? It's not limited to any type of, solvent or water or anything like that?
That's exactly right. So whatever paint would be used in a typical, not just automotive line, but any industrial applications line, we can use that in our system. One other nice thing about the way our robot is and the booth is set up, we can use as little as 300 milliliters of paint for one spray application. That's important because sometimes with these kind of a larger application booth, you need like a gallon of paint because you've got lines going into the booth from a corner of the room. In this robot, the paint is applied in a cartridge, which is in the arm of the robot. So once again, we can use as little as 300 milliliters. Why that's important is if I'm running an experiment or a ladder, maybe this much pigment, or this much additive, and a little bit more additive. If I have to make a gallon of paint for every spray out, it becomes like a lot of work. But this allows us to do things really quickly, and we really like that feature of it, of a small amount of paint.
I'm assuming there's probably, like, especially with the manufacturers, if the manufacturers tried to run tests in their facility, I mean, it would probably even use more than just a gallon. I'm sure that, like, even the coatings manufacturers, they're probably set up even, better than a manufacturer for those small applications. But in our case, so you're saying there's actually a lot less waste.
Oh, a lot less waste, right. Mm-hmm. And that becomes important when you're running experiments before you get to the finished paint. But we also can handle large volumes of paint, no problem, because of the way we're set up. So if we need to run maybe a series of panels for either ourselves or for our customers to send to Florida or for some other testing, we have the capacity to get that all sprayed out in a short period of time.
And I'm assuming this is very unique for a pigment manufacturer, because I haven't been exposed to any of our competitors having this kind of equipment. Obviously, I would imagine it was a pretty good investment.
Yeah, well, you make a really good point. So it is unusual for a raw material supplier to have this type of a application center, so flexible for large parts, especially, also that we can control our conditions. But it was an investment that ECKART felt it was good to make because, as I mentioned before, on the OEM line, when you're using Bell application, you're putting a lot of paint on in a short period of time, that can affect the way our pigments look in the coating. So this gives us an opportunity to understand what's going on and to make the best pigment possible for the application.
So, because we all, again, the robot seems to be the centerpiece, so we always talk about the robot. But we talk about A2CE as a whole. We have people here that are capable of spraying by hand, sure, and they are amazing sprayers. Can you kind of compare and contrast really what's the value in having both, in having a technician who's very capable spraying versus having the robot do it?
Well, we're always working with customers. The customer kind of wants to know how it's going to work in their application or in their customer's application. So we have three ways of putting the paint on. As you mentioned, the robot with a bell is quite automated. Everything is automated about it. We also have something called a Spraymation, which is a reciprocal spray out. So the panel on the grid stays, it moves up and down, whereas the gun itself kind of stays relatively stationary. It goes side to side. That gives you also control, but it's only in a two-dimensional space as opposed to the robot, which is three-dimensional. And then a lot of application is done by hand. And so we also have that capability. As you mentioned, we have some really good spraymen here who know what they're doing. That really relates to maybe refinish application, where that is almost always hand sprayed. Also, several other smaller industrial applications is hand sprayed. And a lot of times the human, kind of observes what he's doing, what he or she is doing while they're putting the paint on. And so they adjust what they're doing to get that look. So sometimes you want to avoid that human interaction. So that's where the Spraymation and the robot are useful. Other applications, you want to take advantage of the sprayer's knowledge of what it's going to look like in the end product. So we offer that both capabilities to our customers. And we're really lucky because, as you said, not only is it unusual to have a huge robot like we do, but it's also unusual to have such skilled paint people as we do.
So we really could be like a one-stop solution in fine tuning the pigment's performance in the OEM side of things, and then also in, like you said, that refinishing, making sure that the touch up, or whatever kind of is in line with the way it's supposed to look.
Exactly right. So it's if you're working with metallics, if you're working with effect pigments, and you want to know how it's going to look, you can call ECKART here in Louisville to get that worked out because we're capable of doing everything that your customer could be capable of doing.
So we always generically start talking about, metallic and pearls, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the kind of pigments that we run through there that's in our, in our portfolio, whether we're talking silver dollar, vacuum metallized pigments, our new Illuminate brand, etc.
Right. So the common thing to all of the pigments we supply is that they are flake-like pigments. That is, they're not round and spherical, but rather lamellar. So that and that's an important thing. So you always want your flake pigments to line themselves correctly in the paint, and usually that means aligning along the parallel with the substrate. When we're talking about visual effects from aluminums or pearls, that's that alignment parallel to the substrate gives you the brightest look, the most effect from the pearls. When you're talking about corrosion resistance, for instance, if you're using a zinc flake, a lamellar zinc pigment, that alignment also gives you the connection and conductivity you need to maximize your corrosion resistance. And that's really the key to understanding the application, because in the specific paint, it may need rheology to help, it may not need rheology to help. We can help the customer determine that. Some of the pigments themselves orient themselves better than others. So we can always advise on that. And that's the value of having our application facility, because we can understand that better. So as you mentioned, there's several types of pigments. The aluminum pigments are primarily for look, and within that world of aluminum pigments, as you mentioned, we have different geometries. So cornflake pigments have a little rough surface to them. They diffuse the light a little more. Silver dollar pigments have a very smooth surface, so they are more reflective. Vacuum metallized pigments are very, very, very thin, so as they lay down in the paint, they're almost like a foil. And so it's like you're spraying on an aluminum foil to really maximize brightness and effect. When you're looking at pearlescent pigments, our Simic and our Luxan pigments, either based on synthetic mica or on glass flake, those geometries affect the way the light goes through the pigment, and so you get a variety of reflection and diffusion to give you different shades of reds and blues and greens from those pigments. It's really, 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 really nice.
So when you say what you described as the foil style or foil application, we're talking about chrome effects or mirror effect, and we're able to. So some people call it VMPs or vacuum metallized pigments. Other people call it PVDs or PVD pigments. Internally, and our brand is obviously Metaller. Right. So we spray Metaller through all of the equipment here in our automotive center. So we can any type of automotive application, we could do that with our VMPs.
That's exactly right, and it's very interesting you bring that up, because I mentioned before that our robot is equipped with a bell applicator, which I mentioned puts out a lot of volume of paint on at one time. Often when you're spraying vacuum metallized pigments, you want to put on as little paint as you can to allow those flake pigments to line up just perfectly. So we do a lot of work kind of taking that high volume bell application with the vacuum metallized pigments to get them to maximize the look that you can get from Bell application. And that's a real advantage for us, that we're able to use that equipment to explore what we can do in terms of maximizing the VMP look in a high production application like an automotive assembly line, for instance. And you mentioned Metalure is our brand for vacuum metallized pigments. HydroShine is our brand for those VMP pigments in a water system. So one thing, the other, separate from what we do here, ECKART's technology for silica encapsulation to protect the aluminum pigments really shows itself with the vacuum metallized pigments, because remember how thin those things are. So you need to protect that thin pigment from water while it's in the system, but you can't put too much on to mess up the look as the flakes lay down. And I'm really impressed with how ECKART is able to protect those pigments in a way that maximizes the look of the HydroShine brand.
So in theory, is basically just to kind of to layman's or summarize what you're saying. This equipment actually allows us to push our pigments further than what we probably thought they could. So if a competitor could almost have like an equal pigment, but they wouldn't necessarily know that they can get the quality or the shine or the reflection out of it that we can, right, because they don't have this equipment.
I think that's exactly right. One of the things I think ECKART is very strong at is our understanding of paint. So we not only make pigments that work really, really well, but we also know how to use them. And as you say, in our application center, we can push the boundaries of how you would normally think these pigments can use in terms of the solids level of the paint that you can use, the speed of the bell, the speed of the application. So we have a great understanding not only of our pigment technology, but of the applications technology and the paint technology itself. Everybody that works here in our tech service lab came from a paint background. So we are paint formulators and paint applicators who have learned pigment technology also. It's a nice fit, and it really helps our customers.
And I only have one more question. One of the things I was surprised about a long time ago when I started here was that the amount of communication, the internal communication that we have between all of these different departments, and that we view it more as like market facing. And could you explain and give us a little bit of an idea on what kind of communication, like are you talking to sales, talking to R&D, talking to people in Germany, how much communication and using this as a tool to kind of solve more than just hey, we need to spray some samples type of.
Sure. ECKART is almost like a tight-knit family in that terms of communication among groups. We make pigments here in Louisville, we make pigments in Germany, we make pigments in other locations. So I am constantly talking to our colleagues in those locations who also do the same type of work we do. Their application centers may have different equipment, and that's one other nice thing is our application centers have unique equipment. So if we need to spray something for our colleagues in Asia or in Europe, we can do that. If we need them to do something in a special application, we do that. So a lot of communication back and forth, a lot of exchanging materials back and forth, so we know each other's technology really well. It turns out in different regions, paint technology is a little bit different. It's all generally the same, but those little details are important, and so we communicate about that a lot. And then beyond coatings, sometimes there are things that come up in coatings films that maybe the resin is really thick. Maybe that relates more to what our guys in plastics do than what we do, or maybe something kind of relates to a powder coatings application. So we have all that expertise with people here, and we can communicate very, very easily. It is a real nice unified approach to technology sharing, and then understanding what's going on in the market among ourselves.
Well, that's good. It sounds like you have a good diversity of perspectives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that sums up everything I had. So,
Okay, great.
hope I didn't absorb too much of your time. But
Not at
thank
all.
you very much for doing this, and hopefully we'll hear more about A2CE in the future.
All right, thanks again.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.